Ladies and gentlemen, in life, and especially in love, there comes a moment when you learn something so profound, so transformative, it shifts the entire course of how you see relationships. And when that moment arrives, remember this: do not speak, because not every treasure is meant to be displayed. Not every emotion is meant to be explained. And not every connection is meant to be shared with the world. There is a silent wisdom, one that whispers, protect what is sacred. We live in a time where silence is mistaken for weakness, and overexposure is confused with transparency. But the most beautiful parts of your relationships, the trust, the intimacy, the vulnerability, they grow best in privacy, not publicity. The ancient teachings remind us, the wise man stores up knowledge, but the mouth of the fool invites ruin. This is not just a proverb, it is a mirror. How many relationships have broken not from the inside but because of the noise outside? You share too soon. You announce too loudly. You open doors to people who were never meant to enter. There is power in being still. There is clarity in silence. There is protection in privacy. Do not mistake silence for hiding. You are not hiding what you love. You are honoring it. You are not ashamed. You are aware. The moment you begin to understand the depth of someone's soul, the moment you see past appearances, past patterns, and into their pain and potential, that is not the time to post or parade or preach. That is the time to sit, to observe, to understand. Some truths in life carry a power so profound that they can alter the very foundation of how we see ourselves and others. In the context of relationships, this truth becomes even more delicate. There comes a time when you encounter an insight, an experience, or a realization so deep, so intimate, that it feels like a secret given directly to your spirit. It may be the moment you understand what truly makes someone feel loved. It may be the painful awareness of what broke something that once seemed unbreakable. It might even be the quiet realization that your worth is not determined by how much you're needed, but by how deeply you're known. These revelations don't come easily, and they don't come often. That's why, once you receive them, you must protect them. In our relationships, especially romantic ones, there is a temptation to speak too soon, to share too much, to turn sacred things into common things by exposing them before they've had time to root themselves in our hearts. This is where many falter, because the world has trained us to believe that everything must be spoken, everything must be shared, and that if we're not openly expressing our feelings, our milestones, our struggles, we are hiding. But there is a vast difference between hiding and protecting. One is born of fear, the other of reverence. Consider the spiritual idea of the Holy of Holies, the innermost part of the ancient temple, a place only a select few could enter, and even then only after intense preparation. Why? Because some things are too sacred to be casually accessed. Our modern relationships lack this sense of sacredness. We talk about our partner's flaws with friends. We post intimate details on social media. We seek validation from people who have no role in the story, and in doing so, we rob our relationships of their dignity. The secret you discover, whether it's about yourself, your partner, or the nature of connection itself, is not meant for everyone. If spoken too soon, it may be misunderstood, criticized, or even mocked. And in that judgment, its power diminishes. What could have been a source of healing and growth becomes another opinion for others to dissect. This is why silence is not weakness, it is wisdom. Silence gives you space to process, to discern, to decide what is real, what is reaction, and what is revelation. In the silence, you allow the truth to take shape within you, rather than handing it away for someone else to mold. In the silence, you learn how to carry your truth instead of broadcasting it in hopes that someone else will carry it for you. Think of how a seed grows. It begins in darkness, in quiet. It is covered, hidden, and protected, while it breaks open and transforms. If you dig it up too early to show others, you kill its potential. Your relationship insights, especially the painful, powerful ones, are like that seed. They need time, they need depth, they need to grow inside of you before they can offer fruit. This does not mean you never speak. It means you speak at the right time, to the right person, with the right intention. And until then, you hold the secret with care, not out of fear, but out of love, not out of shame, but out of wisdom. Because when you know the weight of what you carry, you no longer feel the need to prove it. You simply live it. And that in itself is power. Silence is often misunderstood in today's world. People equate silence with weakness, passivity, or fear. But when we look closer through the lens of both spiritual insight and personal experience, we see that silence is not the absence of strength, but the presence of it. In relationships especially, the ability to remain silent at the right time is not a lack of communication, it is a form of mastery. There is a time to speak, yes, but there is also time to remain still, to observe, to breathe, and to wait. A time to withhold your reaction, not because you're suppressing something, but because you understand that not every emotion is meant to be voiced the moment it arises. Not every thought needs to be said to be real, and not every issue needs to be confronted the moment it's felt. This is what separates maturity from impulse, wisdom from recklessness. When a person begins to develop emotional discipline, one of the first lessons they encounter is the power of their own words. Words can be healing or destructive. They can build or they can burn. And once spoken, they cannot be taken back. In relationships, especially close ones, words shape the atmosphere. A careless sentence can create wounds that linger for years. A hasty accusation can erode trust that took a lifetime to build. This is why silence is strength. It is the decision to withhold your fire until it has been refined, to let your anger pass through the filter of understanding before it becomes language. It is the humility to say nothing when you don't yet know what your heart truly feels. It is the awareness that timing matters, that not every moment is a teaching moment, not every hurt is an invitation to speak, and not every misunderstanding requires immediate correction. The book of Ecclesiastes teaches us that there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. This isn't just ancient wisdom, it's practical truth. Relationships are built not just by what is said, but by what is left unsaid. It's in the grace of restraint that love often grows deeper. When you resist the urge to correct, to lecture, to defend, or to explain, you leave room for the other person to feel seen, not judged. You allow space for tension to settle and understanding to rise. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do in a moment of conflict is to say nothing, not because you are avoiding, but because you are choosing peace over pride. You are recognizing that reaction is easy, but response measured, thoughtful, and timely response is divine. And in that moment, silence becomes a form of protection, not just for the other person, but for the relationship itself. When someone is speaking from a place of emotion, they may not need your answers. They may need your presence. Your silence becomes an act of listening, a space where they can unfold without interruption. When someone is processing their pain, your silence tells them you're not trying to fix them, just hold them. And when you're in pain yourself, choosing silence can be your way of honoring the process rather than forcing clarity too soon. This kind of silence is not empty. It is full of intention, full of discernment, full of spiritual weight. It takes more strength to be quiet in the right moment than to speak in the wrong one. It takes more courage to wait and understand than to rush and demand. And it takes far more wisdom to listen with your spirit than to speak with your ego. So the next time you feel the urge to say something, pause, feel it, weigh it. Ask yourself if the words you want to speak are born from love or from fear, from ego, or from truth. And if you are not sure, choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because you have something too valuable to say it at the wrong time. That is not weakness. That is strength in its purest form. Even a fool is thought-wise if he keeps silent, and discerning if he holds his tongue. These words from Proverbs 17:28 are more than just ancient poetry. They are a profound truth about human nature and the role of restraint in relationships. In a world where everyone is quick to speak, quick to judge, and even quicker to defend, the person who practices silence stands out, not as weak or timid, but as wise. This verse doesn't praise silence for silence's sake. It honors the ability to choose silence with awareness. Even a fool, it says, can appear wise when he knows how to remain quiet. Why? Because silence buys time. It creates space. It holds back words that could destroy. In the context of relationships, this wisdom becomes especially vital. So often in relationships, whether romantic, familial, or even friendships, people are more focused on being right than being relational. We interrupt, we defend, we argue not to understand, but to win. We speak out of emotion instead of insight. And when we do this, we turn conversations into battlefields, where both hearts come away wounded. But when someone chooses to stay silent, especially when provoked, it changes everything. It introduces stillness into chaos. It allows emotions to settle. It opens the door to clarity. Silence doesn't mean you're agreeing with what's being said. It means you're considering it. You're evaluating it. You're letting wisdom shape your response instead of letting your ego drive your reaction. There is great power in restraint. People often underestimate how much strength it takes to not say something, to hold back when you're hurt, when you're misunderstood, when you feel disrespected. Yet those are the moments where silence becomes spiritual, not in a passive or suppressed way, but in a deeply intentional way. You're not ignoring the situation, you're honoring the moment by refusing to let your emotions control the outcome. Think of how many conflicts could be softened or even avoided altogether if one person simply chose to be silent, not in defeat but in love. Think how many relationships fall apart, not because of what was done, but because of what was said in the heat of a moment. Words spoken in anger become scars, and once those words are released, they can't be unspoken. Biblical wisdom, like the proverb above, serves as a compass, pointing us to a higher way of living, not ruled by the flesh but guided by discernment. It's not about suppressing truth or avoiding confrontation. It's about knowing when and how to speak, so that your words give life rather than take it. Even Jesus, during his trial, remained silent when accused, not because he had nothing to say, but because he understood the spiritual weight of timing. His silence wasn't weakness, it was power under control. And that is what true wisdom looks like. Not always in the loudest voice, but in the quietest confidence. When you withhold a harsh word, you protect the heart of another. When you listen instead of interrupt, you give someone dignity. When you choose to observe instead of react, you allow love the space to grow. That kind of silence is not passive. It is deeply active. It's a choice, a practice, a form of self-mastery. So the next time you're tempted to speak out of pride, pain, or pressure, remember the ancient wisdom. Even a fool can appear wise if he learns to be still. And in relationships, that stillness might be the very thing that saves what your words could have destroyed. Let your silence be guided not by fear, but by discernment. Let it be a shelter, not a prison, and let it be a reflection of your inner strength. Quiet, steady, and deeply rooted in truth. In any meaningful relationship, the concept of boundaries is not just useful, it is essential. And when it comes to emotional and spiritual growth, one of the most critical boundaries you must learn to set is this. Not everyone deserves full access to your emotional blueprint. Your inner world, your fears, your longings, your vulnerabilities, your dreams, is not meant for just anyone. It is sacred ground, and only those who have proven themselves worthy through trust, respect, and consistency should be invited into that space. Many people mistake openness for authenticity. They believe that being completely transparent with everyone they meet is a sign of honesty and emotional intelligence. But in truth, unfiltered access to your heart is not a gift, it's a responsibility. And not everyone is ready to carry that weight. Just as you wouldn't hand over your house keys to a stranger, you shouldn't hand over your soul to someone who hasn't shown the maturity or care to hold it gently. Yet this is what many do in relationships, especially early on. They overshare. They confess too much too soon. They reveal traumas, deep secrets, or private feelings to someone they barely know. Not because it is wise, but because they are looking for connection, validation, or relief. And while their intention may come from a place of sincerity, the result is often disappointment, broken trust, and inner confusion. The truth is, people reveal themselves over time. And part of wisdom is letting them observe how they handle small responsibilities before entrusting them with bigger ones. Watch how they speak about others before giving them your silence. Pay attention to how they respond when you're weak, not just when you're strong. These are the signs that tell you whether someone should be granted access to your deeper emotional spaces. This discernment isn't cold or guarded. It's loving. It's a form of self-respect. And in fact, it's biblical. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." Guarding your heart doesn't mean closing it. It means knowing its value and protecting it accordingly. It means having the spiritual and emotional awareness to distinguish between someone who's genuinely seeking to know you and someone who's simply curious, entitled, or passing time. In relationships, when boundaries are missing, so is clarity. When people have unfiltered access to your emotions without accountability, they begin to think they are entitled to your peace, your time, and even your healing. That's when manipulation, misunderstanding, and emotional dependency start to take root. Healthy love cannot grow where there is no boundary. Just as a garden needs fences to protect it from being trampled, your inner life needs boundaries to thrive. These boundaries tell others, this is who I am, this is what I value, and this is how I expect to be treated. If someone is offended by those boundaries, they were likely drawn to control, not connection. And let's be honest, not everyone who says they care actually knows how to care. Not everyone who listens knows how to hold space without judgment. Not everyone who wants your story is ready to honor your truth. That's why silence is often the first line of protection. You don't have to explain your past to every new person. You don't owe your scars to anyone. The right person will earn that access over time, through consistency, kindness, and a quiet willingness to be present. Your emotional blueprint is sacred. It is the map of your growth, your pain, your wisdom, and your resilience. Don't let it become public property in the name of vulnerability. Let it remain private until proven otherwise. Because once you learn the power of selective sharing, you don't just protect your peace, you preserve your soul. There is a quiet danger that often goes unnoticed in relationships. A force that slowly erodes intimacy, connection, and trust. That force is the need to be seen, not for who we are, but for what we have, what we do, or what we've achieved. It's the compulsion to showcase our relationships, to prove our love, to get praise for our loyalty, or to display the depth of our connection in front of others. This is not intimacy. This is ego. And the more ego is involved, the less space there is for real love to grow. At the beginning of a relationship, or even during moments of emotional high, it can feel natural to talk about your partner with pride, to share the gestures, the words, and the promises made behind closed doors. But when that sharing becomes constant, when it becomes a performance or a strategy to validate your worth or your relationship, It starts to damage what should be protected. The truth is, some of the deepest moments of love are meant to be kept between two souls. They are not for applause. They are not for social media. They are not for others to analyze or approve. When you begin to bring those sacred moments into the public space too often or too early, you risk exposing something that isn't ready to face the weight of outside judgment. Validation is tempting. It feels good when people say, "You're lucky," or "You two are perfect together." But if the relationship depends on this external admiration, it begins to collapse the moment that praise fades, or worse, turns to criticism. When your connection becomes a show, the audience controls the story. And you are no longer building something for yourselves, you're maintaining something for them. In many cases, oversharing is not love. It is insecurity disguised as openness. When we overshare, what we are often saying is, "I need someone to affirm that this is real. I need to hear that I am enough. I need to prove that I am lovable." But love that is constantly on display rarely has space to develop roots. It becomes all surface, shiny and presentable, but fragile underneath. The ego thrives on attention. It wants to be recognized, celebrated, and even envied. But intimacy, the deep, quiet, spiritual connection between two people, thrives on stillness. It does not need to be seen to be strong. In fact, the more secure the bond, the less it needs to be declared. Love matures in the unseen moments, the forgiveness that no one witnesses, the support given without words, the understanding exchanged in silence. These are the foundations of real connection, and they don't require a spotlight. In scripture, we are told not to practice righteousness before others, just to be seen by them. That principle applies not only to our spiritual acts, but also to the way we love. If our goal in expressing affection is to gain admiration or prove worth, we miss the true heart of relationship. Real love isn't loud. It's not always poetic. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and invisible to everyone but the two people who are holding it. So we must be careful. There is a time to share, and there is a time to hold sacred. There is a beauty in mystery, a strength in not explaining everything to everyone. When you remove ego from your relationships, you begin to experience a love that no longer needs an audience. It just needs honesty, care, and presence. Love is not built to be performed. It is built to be lived. The most beautiful things are often unseen. The roots of a tree, the foundation of a home, the bond between two people who know that what they have is enough, even when no one else sees it. Let the ego step aside and let love stand on its own. The wisdom to stay silent doesn't just come from restraint, it comes from discernment. In relationships, especially close ones, there will always be moments when you could say something, you could expose what someone did, you could correct, confront, or clarify. But just because you can speak doesn't mean you should. True maturity is found in knowing the difference between what is necessary and what is simply reactive. This is where emotional discipline and spiritual clarity must come together. Sometimes silence isn't about hiding truth. It's about choosing peace. Not all battles are worth fighting. Not all truths need to be spoken aloud, especially when the motivation behind our words is not rooted in love or healing, but in ego, frustration, or the desire to be right. Silence, when used with wisdom, becomes a tool not for manipulation, but for protection. Protection of your peace, your integrity, and the long-term health of the relationship. There are moments in relationships where saying too much too soon can damage something that was still forming. When you uncover every flaw, every thought, every judgment without timing, you might not be offering truth, you might be offering a version of control. In many cases, what we call honesty is really an attempt to relieve our emotional pressure without considering the impact it has on the other person. It's an offloading, not a sharing. Scripture teaches us, A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. That means the value of what you say is directly tied to when and how you say it. Truth spoken without compassion is cruelty. Correction offered without timing is rejection. And confession without context is confusion. You may be right in what you feel, but wrong in how you handle it. Silence in these moments gives space for truth to mature before it's delivered. In love, especially, silence can be the soil where understanding grows. You begin to see that you don't always need to explain yourself to be at peace. You don't always need to correct someone's perception to feel secure. You don't need to react to every misunderstanding or defend every part of your character. In fact, many times, your silence says more than your explanation ever could. It says, I value peace more than pride. It says, I don't need to be right to be whole. It says, I trust that truth doesn't always need to be loud. There is a power in being unprovoked. When you reach the point where someone's behavior or words no longer control your voice, you have stepped into emotional authority. You begin to understand that some things are better left unsaid, not out of fear, but out of care. Not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know that love isn't proven in confrontation, it's proven in patience. You also begin to realize that some people won't understand your silence, and that's okay. Not everyone will recognize that your quiet is not absence, but presence under control. That your choice to stay silent is not withdrawal, but a boundary. And if they are meant to walk closely with you, they will eventually come to respect that silence as strength. There is divine strategy in saying less, in choosing your words carefully, in weighing the outcome before you speak, and in trusting that sometimes the greatest impact comes from what you don't say. Silence is not avoidance. It is a form of spiritual posture. It's a declaration that not everything requires a voice. Some things require stillness, space, and sacred waiting. So when you feel the urge to speak, just to relieve your inattention, pause, breathe, ask, is this truth or just noise? Is this love or just reaction? And if the answer is unclear, wait. Because what is truly important will remain, and what isn't will pass without a single word spoken. In relationships, whether romantic, familial, or spiritual, the true mark of wisdom is not always found in what you say, but in what you choose not to say. Silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is sacred discipline. It is the space where clarity is born, peace is preserved, and love is protected. Once you know the secret that not every thought deserves expression, that not every emotion must be aired, and that true strength often hides in stillness, you begin to guard your heart with holy care. You stop explaining your value to those who cannot see it. You stop performing your love for those who do not understand it. And you begin to walk with quiet confidence, choosing peace over pride, depth over display, and wisdom over reaction. Speak when your words build, not when they break. Reveal only to those who've earned your truth, and let your silence speak volumes about the strength within you. Because once you know the secret, keep your mouth shut, not out of fear, but out of power, not from pride, but from love, and not to hide the truth, but to honor it.